Well, hello, Mayor, council members, and community. This is Sue Hagener, your Finance Director, and today I'd like to give you an overview of the city's financial performance for the last year. Of course, these results are not audited yet and will be subject to audit later this year. The city as a whole performed very well in 2024. All operational funds, which includes the general fund, street operations, and both water and sewer operations, had strong revenues and expenditures came in under budget. And we ended the year with outstanding reserves. And ever since COVID, the city has struggled to deliver capital projects due to supply chain issues and lack of city staffing to bring them to fruition. But this changed a little bit in 2023 and shows significant progress in 2024. We have a fully staffed engineering department and a very robust capital improvement program. Okay, so you have a lot of materials in your packet. This presentation for one, narratives on each major fund and how it performed. You have some graphs, and you have this document, which I think is one of my favorites, because it's the one-stop shop or snapshot for how the city performed over the year. Let me take a minute to describe what you are seeing here. So down the left-hand side, you're going to see all of the different funds that the city uses to account for different activities. So in the top left-hand corner, you're going to see the general fund. And I'm going to briefly talk about the columns that are the most important, labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We'll start with 1. That's called budgeted revenues, and that column represents the total year's budgeted revenues for each fund. You can see the general fund has $12.7 million budgeted for the year. In column 2, you have the actual revenues that were receipted into the city of $13.1 million. And next to that, the column is the difference of $416,000, or 3% over budget. In columns 3s and 4, you've got your budgeted and actual expenditures for a difference or an under budget situation of $139,000. And then in 5 and 6, you have the actual net gain or loss for the fund. In this case, it's $276,000, and our actual ending fund balance of $3.971 million. And it's that column that we compare to our fund balance policies to make sure that we're in compliance. So hopefully this document makes sense to you. Okay, now on to some more specifics about our operational funds, starting with the general fund. So we had a beginning balance of about $3.7 million, and it was over what we forecasted, which is good. It complied with fund balance policy, and again, it represents reserves or cushion or beginning cash. As far as revenues went, revenues of $13.1 million were $416,000, or 3% more than budget, and that was primarily due to the following factors. Sales tax proceeds were $163,000, or 4% more than budget, and sales tax receipt in this year actually exceeded prior year receipts by 3%, or $129,000. So that's good news, a growing sales tax base. Our property tax was just slightly below budget, or $19,000 less, which I think is it's likely to be a timing issue. Utility taxes, they always perform well. They were 4% more than budget and provided an additional $73,000 to our operations. Licenses and permits, which is really related to development activity, they added about $57,000 more to our operations than we expected, which is great. I will mention that licenses and permit revenues did fall below prior year receipts by about 12%, or $66,000. And it should be remembered that these revenues can be super unpredictable, and they depend on a ton of different factors. The total number of permits issued in 2024 of 182 permits lagged behind prior year activity of 211 permits issued by about 29, or 14% fewer permits. Intergovernmental revenues, which is primarily grant receipts, exceeded budget by 21%, or $86,000, and that's mostly related to the work we're doing on the comprehensive plan, as well as the police department's reaccreditation. We got a grant for that. Charges for goods and services were just slightly below budget, mostly due to overhead allocations and some different development-related activities. And finally, miscellaneous revenues were $55K, or 26% more than budget, and that is primarily interest on investments, rental income, and grants from private sources. So let's learn a little bit more about sales tax, which represents 53% of the general fund's taxes that it takes in. So this is a graph of the major sales tax categories and receipts by month. Next to the receipts by month, you can see it's toward the right-hand side of the chart. You'll see what was budgeted. Across the top, you'll see the major categories such as food service and accommodations, construction, retail, wholesale, and other. And as you can see, the retail portion in purple there, it's the largest portion of our sales tax receipts. It comes in around 60% of total receipts. It should be noted that receipts come in but 2 months after they are earned. So you can see that Christmas receipts, they come in February, and you can see where our Lavender Festival that happens in July comes in September. As you know, many of the activities draw folks to town. But those are some of the highest sales tax receipts during the year. And this is a historical look at sales tax dating back 20 plus years. And you can see where in around 2004, we started to bring in our box stores, and you can see that sales tax receipts, especially in the purple shade, the retail, grew significantly over that time. And on the left side of the graph, as you move to the right, you can see the development boom, followed by the Great Recession, which lasted about 5 or 6 years. You can see where we started to recover in roughly 2016 and 2017. And finally, you land in 2024, where we collected about $4.5 million in sales tax revenue. Again, this money goes into the general fund, and it helps pay for general governmental services like parks, police, streets, information technology, finance, city management, etc. And this is a historical look at another source of revenue to the general fund, which again is part of a healthy mix of revenues that keeps this fund strong. So this is a history of utility tax. It should be noted that municipalities are allowed to levy a tax on any utility that operates within the city limits. You can see on the far right-hand side that we collected about $2 million in utility taxes in 2024. On the left-hand side of the graph, you can see that we've got tax on electric, garbage, cable, telephone, water, and sewer utilities. And just look at the slope upward from 2010 to 2024. That's a very stable source of revenue and grows an average of about 4% per year. All right, now let's talk about general fund expenditures of $12.9 million. They were under budget by $139,000, or 1%, and the components of that number is wages and benefits, which is kind of self-explanatory. Those were under budget by 1%. Supplies, Supplies include anything from janitorial and office supplies to fuel, small tools, and really anything that's consumable. Those were under by 20K. Service charges were also under. Service charges include professional service contracts and consultants. It includes utility expenses, repair and maintenance, and even travel, meals, and conferences. Those were under by 101,000. Intergovernmental expenditures, those were over budget, but just slightly. Those include all of our interlocal agreements with other governmental agencies, like our contract with Clallam County for criminal justice services and our PENCOM dispatch services. Our PENCOM dispatch services for our police department and audit services provided by the state auditor's office, those what brought us a little bit over budget on the general fund expenditures. So since wages and benefits make up about 70% of our operational expenditures, I thought we'd take a specific look at these costs over the years. This is specific to the general fund. So this graph shows a history of wages. Wages are in green and benefits are in blue. Again, specific to the general fund whose staff provide general governmental services. So with a population in 2010 of 6,625, we had 55 FTEs. In 2024, with a population of 8,405, we had 72 staff members providing those services. Again, that's your clerk, your city management, human resources, the city attorney's office, police department, parks, information technology, finance, etc. So again, the population from 2010 to 2024, that was a growth of 27% total, or an average growth rate of about 2% per year. Now, with the number of FTE, there was a 31% growth rate in the number of positions providing those governmental services. And again, it averages out to a growth rate of about 2% per year. I will mention that there was no change in the number of positions since last year. However, wages and benefits totaled over $8 million in 2024 and grew 13% over the prior year. And again, this is specific to the general fund. That growth rate is just kind of unsustainable, but it was due to union contract adjustments and market adjustments for other staff. The market conditions surrounding employment and wages have been super wonky over the last few years, and frankly, the city, with its goal to pay competitively and fairly for the work being performed, we need to pivot significantly over the year. So let's review. We had excellent fund balances and revenues, and our expenditures were within budget. Our ending fund balance of $3.9 million is actually above policy maximum. We have a minimum requirement of $2.2 million and a maximum of $3.4 million. So we're about $500,000 over the maximum. And that's not a bad thing. That just means that we can pivot and transfer some excess funds on hand to things like debt or to things like capital projects, which will likely be a budget amendment you'll see in 2025. Now let's talk about street operations. Well, our revenues and expenditures were kind of even with each other, both at $1.2 million and both under budget. What are some of the revenues that support street operations? Well, the general fund transfers almost $700,000 per year into the street fund, so our street people can operate properly. The street operations is also supported by the Transportation Benefit District tax. We transfer money from the reserved tax account into street operations. We get a little money from the state via motor vehicle fuel tax of about $158,000, and we had other revenues of about $81,000. which consist of insurance claims and income from property maintenance services, as well as investment income. So what do we spend in streets? Well, outside of wages and benefits, we buy street signs and we buy road paint and road markings. We've got to purchase de-icer and sand for those snowy days, light poles, signals, and then we have to pay for the utilities that keep those lights and those signals on. We buy asphalt and fuel and equipment and parts. On to water operations. We had revenues of $3 million that were over budget by $93,000 or by 3%, which is great due to growth in our rate adjustments. We had expenditures of $3.3 million that were they were $4,000 under budget, or essentially on target with budget. I mean, just right there. Our ending fund balance of $1.2 million is at policy midpoint, so perfect. The target's between $882,000 and $1.6 million, and we just landed there right in the middle. So let's take a little closer look at water operations, revenue, and expenditures over the years. So the light orange bar, those are revenues. The darker orange bar, those are expenditures. And the blue bar represents the revenue generated per FTE. So in 2024, we had $3 million in revenues and expenditures which exceeded revenues of about $320,000. And that's primarily due to the increased transfers out to capital and debt reserves. And that's a good thing, as it means that our fund balance grows. We move any excess funds out to pay for capital projects, to expand or maintain our systems. It means that our utility charges for services are not only going to pay for operations, but they're paying for the infrastructure needed to provide those services. So as of 2024, we had 3,125 water accounts, as compared to 2015 with just 2,400 accounts. This represents a total of 30% growth in the number of accounts over the years. At the same time, that you can see that we had 4.5 FTE in 2015, and the same number of FTE, that's 4.5, in 2024. So even as revenues and the number of customers has grown nicely, there's been absolutely no growth in the number of staff servicing all those customers. So revenues of $3 million, that's growth over the prior year. And growth is averaging about 5% a year, when expenditures are averaging an increase of about 7% per year, mind you. So again, there were some very large transfers to capital and debt this last year. And look at that. Revenues per employee is $660,000 in 2024, up from $440,000 in 2015. On to sewer operations. We had revenues of $5.3 million, and they were $230,000 or 5% over budget. Again, good news due to growth and rate adjustments. Our expenditures of about the same, $5.3 million, were $145,000 or 3% under budget. Most categories were under budget with the exception of professional services, which was mostly to pay for internal services provided by other funds, as well as governmental taxes. Obviously, you see an increase in the revenue and you have an increase in your taxes. Our ending fund balance of $2.5 million is right at policy maximum, with a target between $1.4 million and $2.5 million max. Now let's take a look at sewer operations, revenue, and expenditures over the years. Again, the light orange bar is revenues, the darker orange bar are expenditures, and the blue bar represents revenue generated per FTE. So in 2024, we had $5.3 million in revenues and expenditures of a little under that. And again, this was primarily due to increased transfers out to capital and debt reserve. Again, this is a good thing as it means our fund balance grows and we move excess to pay for capital projects to expand or maintain our systems, just what our utility rates are for. Again, in 2024, we had 3,420 sewer accounts compared to 2,600 accounts in 2015. That's growth of about 32% in the number of accounts, while the staffing has only grown about 10% from 10.5 FTE in 2015 up to 11.6 FTE in 2024. Now you can see kind of in the middle of the graphs there in 2018, if you're wondering what that huge dark orange line, what that's all about, in 2018 we made a large transfer out of our operational fund to pay off about $6.3 million in sewer debt. Again, saving interest expenses in the long run. It should be noted revenues are averaging about 4% a year in growth, when expenditures are averaging about 6% a year in growth. So again, that's going to be something that we're going to look at this year when we make recommendations to council for utility rates going forward. Speaking of utility rates, this is a chart of our utility rates over a 10-year period, specifically for the average single-family resident in the city. Now the top line where it says water base rates in green, those base rates have increased over time an average of 3% a year, with some years having no increases at all. The sewer base rate, which is shown in brown, kind of in the middle of the graph, was an average of just 1% over the same period of time. And towards the bottom, you'll see the black numbers. That represents the total combined utility bill for a single-family resident, with an average increase of just $1.20 or 1% per year. So even though the demands on our system keep increasing with growth, we've done a very commendable job in limiting the rate increases on our ratepayers. So on to another fund that's really important to us. We really carefully manage our equipment reserves. So I want to take a quick look at that. So in 2024, we had basically $1.7 million in equipment and vehicle expenditures out of this fund. We were under budget by $335,000 or 17%. That's partially due to the delay in receiving some of the equipment we purchased, as well as some savings that we received from purchasing used items. Our purchases include $65,000 in IT project. We bought 2 police cars and a drone. We bought a street roller, snow plow assemblies, salt and sand spreaders, a sidewalk sucker. That thing's pretty cool. A couple of new public works vehicles to accommodate facilities, 2 used dump trucks, a jet vac truck, which is used by all public works departments, various public work trucks, either replacements or additions, and utility finding radar equipment. The fund balance of $2 million is at 103% of the minimum required 2.5 years of replacement. A few more funds that are of interest is our debt service fund. That's the fund where we pay our civic center debt out of, which was adequately funded. And it was nice to see the savings actually show up in 2024 with our prepayment or calling of bonds early in 2023. Lodging tax had historical revenues this year. Real estate excise tax, despite the cooling market, was over budget by $286,000 or 70% over budget, and that's great. That's just money that goes to pay for capital projects. In the ARPA fund, we we spent $1.485 million in IT projects, in city shop and second floor remodel expenditures, and there is zero balance remaining, meaning all funds have been obligated. Finally, there's the rainy day fund, which still has a $950,000 balance. And drum roll, please. This is a historical look in millions of our capital project expenditures. They are separated out between street projects and all other projects. The streets are in blue and all other projects are kind of in that orange color. On the far right hand side, you can see that we expended almost $10 million on capital projects in 2024. And just look at how that bar compares to the previous years. I think it's the most capital project expenditures in 1 year in the history of the city since I've been here. We'll tell you a little bit more about the projects on the next slide. So again, thanks to a fully staffed engineering department with a lot of gumption and a very robust capital improvement program, we spent almost $10 million in capital project expenditures. For our water projects, we installed seismic equipment on our reservoir. We worked on the Reservoir Road booster station. We had extensive progress, or made extensive progress on our water meter auto read project. We worked on the West Squim Bay corridor, and as you well know, the Silberhorn deep well. Our sewer projects included the water reclamation facility, lab rehab. We got our sewer camera van, which is incredible and gives our staff so much flexibility in monitoring our transmission lines. We did some SCADA improvements down at the WRF. We installed fiber to the WRF for better communications. Again, West Squim Bay corridor work was done. We purchased some radar equipment. We worked on the Doe Run lift station, and again, the water meter auto read project also relates to sewer. In streets, as you well know, we completed the North Squim Avenue sidewalk and bike lanes, and also the related pavement preservation project on North Squim Avenue. We did some pavement conditioning indexing and traffic signal control work. In parks, we purchased the Ruth C. McCord Memorial Park. We made a deposit on new Carrie Blake Park bridges and did some more work on the Centennial Park design. And finally, we did some work to prepare our city shop for its improvement project, as well as the second floor remodel of the Civic Center. Now, as the last slide of this presentation, I just want to be very clear that many of the reports that you have in your packets and in this presentation are completely different than the reports I have to submit to the Washington State Auditor's Office annually. Those schedules are highly complex and they take me approximately 5 months to complete. They are due to the State Auditor's Office per state law 150 days after the fiscal year end, which was December 31st for us. We, in the past, have been audited on a 2-year schedule, every 2 years per state requirements. That's going to switch to every year, as I understand it, in 2025. And it should be noted, we have over 31 years of clean audits. Thank you for listening today, and as always, I'm here to answer any questions you have.